I need an approval of the meeting agenda. First by Miranda, second by Matt. Thank you. I need for number 4, approval of the minutes for the regular meeting on March 1st. I need a motion. First by Miranda, second by Mary. On to number 5, presentations, awards, acknowledgements, and correspondence. I'd like to first take this opportunity to congratulate the boys varsity basketball team for defeating Fredonia and advancing to the Final Four. And also to the girls bowling team for Division II state championships and the great performance on March 4th, 5th for the drama club. The wedding singer, I definitely laughed and I had a good time watching it. So nice job to our students. First, 5.1, I welcome Scott Wagner up to do a presentation on expeditions of empowerment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For me, it'll be easiest to just stay right back here.
Okay, then you don't need that. You got this, and let me just do the share. Maybe. Yeah.
Well, while this is happening, I'll just say I'd like to say thank you to the board and specifically to the superintendent and your staff for making space in the agenda for me to be here tonight and share some information with all of you. My name is Scott Wager. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Expeditions of Empowerment. This is a local nonprofit organization that's been serving young people here in Newark and throughout Wayne, Monroe, and Ontario counties since 2017. The mission of Expeditions of Empowerment is to foster personal growth through outdoor adventure and emotional intelligence. We focus on helping young people develop their self-awareness and independent thinking, which are 2 critical life skills that will help them put their lives onto a positive trajectory. And we do that because they're the future of our communities and of our businesses. Our philosophy is that experiences shape perspective, and perspective shapes outcomes. So we create experiences that are uplifting and that combine problem solving, self-reflection, and a sense of accomplishment to provide meaningful, life-relevant, and memorable learning opportunities for Newark students. I'd be happy to talk about our philosophies and our methodologies later on at the end of the presentation if anybody has any questions. But what I really wanted to focus on today is the work that we've been doing sort of in the background with students here in the community. Our journey in Newark began in 2017 when we kicked off a pilot program with a group of 7th graders who were all facing multiple risk factors. Over the period of 2.5 years, that expedition team joined us on 20 overnight outings and 2 week-long expeditions. All of the students who stuck with us throughout that 2.5-year period persevered, and they graduated on time last year. One of those students that you can see here in the picture reaching her hand out for help, Kiara, she shared last year in her capstone essay that our program is all about empowering kids to do things that they never imagined were possible. She told stories of the experiences she had on the outings with us and a lot of the challenges that she also faced on those outings. But at the end, she summarized and said, Expeditions of Empowerment will always be a part of who I am. And that was based on what she learned in the program and the relationships that she developed in that program. In 2019, we expanded our services and began supporting the My Brother's Keeper program to specifically address some challenges and classroom behavioral issues that a group of 7th grade boys were exhibiting. That summer, we collaborated with the Youth Advocate program and the middle school counseling staff to provide a series of outings for these boys that were specifically designed to try and shift their communication patterns from one that was escalating each other in class and causing problems and tearing each other down emotionally, to a pattern that was more respectful and supportive of each other. The success of those outings led us to create 2 week-long expeditions that were given to the 7th grade boys and 8th grade boys in the MBK program during the summer of 2020. The relationships we built during those expeditions and the insight that we gained about the challenges these particular boys were facing led us to create a customized social emotional learning program that we delivered to them throughout the midst of the pandemic. That program was designed to help them develop their sense of self-efficacy, and we also hoped it would help them increase their sense of personal achievement. At the end of the program, data that I collected showed that they did in fact increase in their self-efficacy. But personally, I was a little bit skeptical of that data, and I wasn't sure, is it because of the work that we were doing, or was it because they were 9 months older and they had just matured? So I asked the school administrators to take a look at some of the panorama data and see if we could look and compare our data to theirs and other members of their peer group. What that data showed was that the participants in our program increased in their self-efficacy, while all of the other boys in the middle school decreased over that same period. So we had some good anecdotal evidence that our program was working, and we had some hard data that showed that as well. After serving almost exclusively boys in the Newark community for 2 years, we decided to bring a different type of equity into our programming, and we created a female empowerment program. That was offered to a group of young ladies that were entering the 9th grade. They were a socially diverse group of young ladies that went on this expedition team, and on the 4th day of the expedition, emotions flared in the morning for reasons that I don't know, and a conflict erupted. Some pretty harsh words were spoken, and some feelings were hurt pretty deeply. By happenstance, our objective for that day was to focus on team communications. So we decided to take a step back, give the team some time and some space to see if they'd resolve that conflict on their own before we went forward with what our communications activities were for the day. Took a little bit of time for the rawness of the emotions to subside a little bit, but when it did, some of these young ladies very naturally and fluidly stepped into leadership positions, employed some of the skills that we had taught them in the prior 3 days, and helped de-escalate each other and repair the damage that had been done to relationships between some of those team members. By mid-morning, they were ready again to work, so we took them on a hike, very casual hike, went down to a beautiful beaver pond to set a good scene, and we worked on some communication activities with them. By the end of that afternoon, they had fully resolved their conflict. They were back to smiling and laughing and being the sort of giggly, goofy young ladies that we had known for the first 3 days. So that was pretty inspiring. Last year, we again offered another female empowerment program to a different group of young ladies that were coming into the 9th grade. This is the group that's shown on the lower of those 2 images. They had a very challenging expedition experience, and for some reason, a few of them thought that this whole program was about fixing them. On the evening of our first night together, they approached me, 2 of the young ladies approached me and said, "Why did I get selected? Why am I here? What problem do I have, and what are you going to fix for me?" I was a little stunned by that question because that wasn't what the program was about at all. So I said, "Oh, you have it all wrong. You're not here to be fixed. You're here because Miss Solon and other people in the middle school saw that you have some natural leadership characteristics, and they want to support those and uplift those so that you can help influence the culture and the climate in the school so that it's a better place for people following in behind you." The most amazing thing of that is when I referred to them as leaders, they stood up taller, their eyes got wider, their smiles got wider, and it changed their perspective. It changed their perspective of themselves. It changed their perspective of what that expedition was going to be like for them. And it also changed their perspective of the school. And that's carried forward into this year. That brings us up to where we are today. Those are just snippets of one experience we had each year along our journey. But what I'd like to really share and what I'm excited about is last month we received a notification that we received a community impact grant from the ESL Federal Credit Union. And this grant is specifically targeting empowering future leaders here in Newark. The grants focus on expanding this female empowerment program that I just described to you a little bit by adding year-long social emotional development to the program, as well as a focused mentoring program for this as well. One of the primary goals, is to connect young women with local female business and organizational leaders to create a career mentorship pathway. It's also aiming to create a continuum of empowered young female leaders and mentors in the high school. For the group of 9th grade young ladies that will come into this program this year, if they stick with it, this program will span the next 3 years. For me and Expeditions of Empowerment, what this does is it allows us to hire the staff that we need to implement a program that we've always envisioned having in place here in Newark. It's just taken a long time to get here. I hope that at the end of this program, it allows us to spotlight Newark as what a school and community partnership can really do and how effective it can be for young people in the program. I know the agenda is busy, so I don't want to take up a lot of time. I just want to share a highlight of some of the work that we have going on this summer for everybody's awareness. For the spring, we're going to continue doing social emotional learning workshops in the high school and the middle school, and we're going to kick off this mentorship program for the female empowerment. We also have some work going on for an expedition for the My Brother's Keeper program that we'll be preparing for an expedition. Over the summer, we have 4 week-long expeditions going for students here in Newark. 2 of them are for female empowerment groups. 1 of them is for a high school My Brother's Keeper program. And the 4th one is for helping a group of students transitioning from middle school into high school be more successful and have better coping skills within that transition. It's a pretty busy summer. There's a lot of other things that are going on as well that I'm not going to take the time to tell you about today, but I wanted to highlight these and really show that we're here, we're reaching out our hands to you to help lift people up, help lift the students up to overcome some of the challenges that they have. I'll stop with the presentation part at this point and ask if anybody has any questions that you'd like me to answer, any feedback, and otherwise I did include a slide, so if you'd like to get a hold of me or contact us in any way, you have access to that through these QR codes in the end.
I have one question. So what are the numbers that you have now, and what are you hoping to increase to over the next 3 years, 2 years?
Can you clarify for me what
who
type
can
of
attend?
numbers?
Like, who can attend your camps? How many group? Is it 10 people?
Understood.
Okay.
We focus on small groups, 8 people or less. And the reason that we do that is anytime you get 10 or more people together, the human nature is to split apart into subgroups that you feel a little bit more comfortable with. The downside of that for us is that takes away that dynamic of them having to work with each other and having to resolve conflict. So we focus on each team is 8 students or less. As far as the numbers, is how many teams we can take, we're really actually limited at the moment by the duration of the summer because we don't want to miss school. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
If there are no other questions, yes, sir.
How do you choose the kids to attend?
We don't actually choose the kids. We work with the school counseling staff to choose the kids. So, admittedly, I don't have an intimate relationship with all of the students here. I'm not in the buildings myself every day, so I don't have the visibility of who needs and could benefit the support that we have. So we work with the counseling staff in all of the schools to make recommendations for the students. We then take those recommendations and reach out to the families directly to explain what our program is, what we're offering them, what risks there are with it, and make sure that the families are on board with it. If they sign off on it, then we engage the youth into joining our team.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Next is 5.2, student behavior and action steps from the building principals. We will start with Lincoln School with Carrie Hamlet. Come on up.
High school down.
Oh, high
Yes.
school down, okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
We can go back.
We'll start with the high school.
Just do what you want.
Thank you.
And then here's the.
And then we'll put it up.
Oh, have fun.
Good evening, thank you for having us. So I'm Kelly Zelke, I'm the principal of the high school here in Newark. Okay, I'm ready. So one of the things that we wanted to start is just by highlighting the number of disciplinary referrals that have been submitted. These are the ODRs, the disciplinary referrals that come to the office, not the classroom referrals. And you can see that it fluctuates pretty significantly throughout the course of the year so far. Again, our lowest month was December, and our highest month so far was January. And so we want to talk through a couple of the things that we noticed looking through this data of the referrals, some things that we noticed, and then some action steps that we've taken from that, from extracting some of that data. So with the referrals, the top two offenses that we noticed were pretty consistent with how they've been the last few years. So 1.04 insubordination is failure to attend class, and then 1.01 is again failure to comply with lawful directions of a teacher, administrator, or district employee. So those are the two codes that come up most often in the disciplinary referrals. So some of the things that we noticed when we looked into that data. The first is in January we did a reset. I don't know.
Just turn it off.
I didn't touch it. Sorry.
Just talk. Yeah.
Just, I'll stand right here.
Yeah. No, she's good right here.
Anybody else want one?
Can I get that one?
You're doing great. So in January, we had a bit of a reset at the high school. So I started in December. We were still working with an interim assistant principal. So in January, we put some new expectations back in place, reviewed some expectations that needed to be reviewed. So we believe that was part of the increase in the referrals in January. In addition to that, historically, the number of referrals in January tend to go up, which could also be because students have been on a break, so they need their own personal reset. So we were not totally surprised by those numbers. In addition to that, one of the things that we did see an increase in, although it didn't make the top, not even the top 5 referrals, we did ask teachers to begin writing referrals for students who were non-compliant with the cell phone policy so that we could address that. So that did increase some of our referrals because we did want teachers to feel supported in that process of keeping cell phones out of sight during class instruction time. Some other things that we noticed is that with the implementation of SmartPass, which started in February, the number of students who have skipped class, which is that first infraction of that we noted on the last slide, has reduced by almost half. So one of the things that has really come out of the implementation of SmartPass is that students are held accountable with the security and monitors having access to students who are supposed to be in the hall, what their schedules should be. That has really reduced the number of students that don't make it to class. One of the things, though, that I do want to take a look at in the future is that the referrals for skipping class, teachers will sometimes write students for skipping class if they've missed 15 minutes, but if they come in halfway through class, it still counts as a class skip. So we do want to work through that logistic to see if they're really skipping class or if they're just very tardy. So that is one thing that we want to look at in the future. And again, class cuts overall have decreased over 50% from last year at the same time. So we do credit Smart Pass with some of that, and also with our increased hall monitors and supervision in the hallways. Almost 90% of our students have less than 10 referrals, and most of the referrals, 73% of the ODRs, are coming from students in our underclass grades, grades 9 and 10. So, so we did take a look at that data to see maybe who's causing most of those referrals and some of the things that we can do differently with those grade levels. Again, most of the 1.01 referrals, the failure to comply, a lot of those referrals are around classroom expectations, or they'll get that that referral will come if they miss a consequence. So, for example, if a student is assigned a lunch detention and they miss lunch detention, that creates that referral code in the ODR. So those are some of the things that we noticed when we drilled down through some of that data. Okay, so in terms of some of the action steps, some of the things that we have done throughout the course of the winter and looking at the data is we've changed our security monitor and teacher hallway supervision. So we've put more people in the hallways, more people at bathrooms, and just created an environment where there is more visibility of adults in the hallway. With, again, the implementation of Smart Pass, that combined with the increased supervision in the hallway has helped to change some of those behaviors. Cell phone practices, again, with that reset, we've also incorporated regular discussion of appropriate use. That's been happening most often in our morning meetings. So when the administrators meet with the students, we talk about the cell phone policy, appropriate use of cell phones, when is and is not the best time to have a cell phone. And again, that's part of our discussion. If we do get cell phone referrals, it's part of the learning process around that referral and that restorative conversation. We've also incorporated behavior contracts with some students and parents. So if the consequences and the conversations are not changing behaviors, we've invited parents to come in with students to go through contracts and just talk about expectations again, and really include the parents in part of that discussion. Some of the restorative practices that we've included, again, are conversations with students about appropriate behaviors, apologies that students have written either to other students, classmates, sometimes teachers, or other adults in the building, paired along with traditional consequences. So they don't replace consequences when those are necessary, but they go along with those consequences to help strengthen the learning process around some of those behaviors. One of the things that we're looking to do, and we've begun a little bit, is to review our classroom discipline documents and just review those and update those. So some of the procedures, the flow chart of who does what, which things are referable, which things are classroom referrals, those need to be reviewed and updated. So they need a little bit of work, so we're putting our building team together and having a shared decision-making group to look at those documents along with our Tier 1 and Tier 2 team members. One of the things that we've also tried to do is really continue our messaging about our pride values in morning meeting most often. We had a bullying presentation in morning meeting, and we regularly do Character Strong in morning meetings and during pride time. So again, continuing those positive lessons is one of the things that we're doing to really hope to change some of those behaviors that we want to see a little differently. And then one of the last things I wanted to highlight is one of our newest action steps. That's the creation of the Principals Council. What we did is we wanted to invite students to meet with the administrators as part of a team to just get student voice. One of the things that we found from students when we surveyed them is that students want to see other students held accountable when it impacts their learning. And what we'd like to do is hear from students what that looks like to them. So to say that we want students held accountable when our learning is affected is one thing, but how does that look and what seems fair? So we wanted to invite students to be part of that council and hear from them. And right now we have 4 students from each grade level as part of that council, and we'll be meeting regularly to hear from them, but then also to do some more positive things in the school. And we also heard from students that they like when the morning meeting and the prime time is a positive celebration. So we want to make sure that we incorporate those as often as possible as well. All right, I will pass it to the middle school.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Clickers. I appreciate it. So at the middle school, our two biggest offenses, you just heard what 1.01 was. That's our insubordination. Our highest offense this year is roughhousing or messing around without injury. This could look like me and our friends are in the hall, we're pushing each other, we're dunking on each other. Anything that is considered, messing around that doesn't rise to physical altercation or we're just joking, those kind of things. But those are what our two highest offenses are currently at the middle school and have been for the whole year. I can get into a little bit about that in a second. Our referrals by month, this is pretty standard of what it's been at the middle school the last few years. And to be honest, we were higher this year in October and November than we were last year in October and November. We were down in September, but we rose. Some of that is through implementation of some of the structures we have in place, because as we do that and we're holding kids accountable for the behaviors and trying to improve it, we anticipated to see those numbers rise a little. In our building, December, January, February, and months around breaks are tricky because sometimes kids don't want to go home for the break, so they start acting up before the break. They don't want to, or they come back from the break and they're so dysregulated and they're out of their routine. So when you're out of your routine for 10 days, like Christmas break, and you're not going to bed till midnight or you're playing video games all night, and then you come back to school the next day, it's really tough to adjust. So those months around the breaks, we were seeing some spikes. So these numbers, as it dips in February, we're actually below where we've been in years past. But this is pretty standard of where we've been, and I don't think typically as we enter the spring and we have some longer months ahead of us, we start to see numbers climb up again, but it's not atypical for anything. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is data from last year moving into this year a little bit. So one of the big pushes of our code of conduct was alignment, so we can have cleaner data so we know what we're looking at. Last year, there was 100 ways to code some physical altercations. And the ways they were coded were fighting, hitting, pushing, or kicking. Okay, so it's like, as you go through last year's data, we have to look at all of those, because those are all what we would code this year as a physical altercation that's physical. Okay, and the difference between that and roughhousing, messing around, may be I'm mad at you and I'm doing this. So it turns into that like playful messing around to what we would consider a physical altercation. For our 6 months that we've had the school year this year, so last year there was 170 referrals that fell into fighting, hitting, pushing, or kicking. This year for our first 6 months we've had 72. Okay, so that's 12 per month. So we're pacing out for the remainder 4 months to be at 120 if we kept that pace. So we've reduced that number by around 50 referrals for the year. Or if you want to look at it that way, we've reduced it kind of by 4 months worth of referrals. Because if we're saying 12, we hit 48, we're reducing the hitting, pushing, kicking. And I'll get into a little bit later about why I believe that is, but some of that simple structures we're putting in place. Hallway supervision in critical areas at critical times doesn't allow for this, or they see the behaviors to start spiking, or kids that are agitated. You know, one of the things we did this year was make our grade level counselors instead of team counselors. So those counselors are at the end of the hallways in the beginning of the day, every day, where they're now picking up on kids that are walking in, and they're seeing that they might be off a little bit, having those discussions. That's all helping to provide softer starts and reduce some of this. Our first noticing in our building is our 8th grade. Our 8th grade accounts for roughly 40% of the referrals in our building. They are kids that went home in 5th grade, roughly, COVID believe it or not, like March 15th or 14th, 3 years ago was the time we were going home and not coming back, or not knowing we were coming back, but it's literally, you know, we're on the 3-year anniversary. These were the kids that went home. And then they came back in 6th grade to partial days. Then they came back last year to an unsettled building with a little admin turnover, some changes. So these kids were really working on relearning school. Some of their behaviors are behaviors of before they left in 5th grade. Our 6th and 7th graders, they were fortunate enough to either A, stay in Kelly School full-time or B, remote for time. I think we had about 30% of our class out that time, but a lot of our kids stayed in there 5 days a week. So we're not surprised to see this from our 8th graders, and it doesn't excuse it, and it doesn't mean we're forgiving it, but it is one of those causes. In 6th grade, the data point that hit us was 110 out of the 278 referrals for that grade are accounted for 5 kids. So 5 kids in the 6th grade are dictating a lot of that. A lot of the tension, and we'll get into that. There's a direct correlation between our staff absences and our office discipline referrals. And it goes both ways. And I've talked about this a little bit with our teachers, is when our teachers are our best classroom managers, and they know our kids the best, and they have the best connections with our kids. Okay, this is a testament to them. This is no blame of them. So when they're out, the kids' routines are off. Okay, and then because their routines are off, now I go to Scott's class, and I'm dysregulated a little bit. And now there may be a referral that comes from him. But then the next day I enter my class, and there was a sub in my class, and things are off. So behaviors are off. So it hits the day of in other classrooms, and then it hits the next day when the teacher returns in their classrooms. And it's like, we had a day in December where 21 staff members were out, and we had 21 referrals. And then we come back the next day, we had another 20 referrals, because it's a lot of that repair work and consistency that our kids need. So the more we can be there, the more consistent our kids are. 78% of our kids in our building have 0 or 1 referral. So I think that's an important number when you think about our tier 1 level. So our kids, when we're talking about that 80% of kids that are at our tier 1, this is our 80%, right? That have 0 or 1 referral. I added something later, but it doesn't, it's not on there, but I need to mention it, that 15 kids in our building account for
3%?
No, that's
No,
3%
that was the
of our
3%.
kids that account for 30% of our
the
referrals.
yes.
So there's 15 kids in our building. That's 3%. So that's our tier 3. So if this gives us the idea of our tier 1, on our tier 3, it's not in there. I can update it and send it to you. 15 kids account for 30% of our referrals. So that's our tier 3 kids. So we really have our system, and our kids are falling behaviorally into the MTSS period, but we got to work on that. So that's some of our noticings, our action plans from that. We really attacked 8th grade right off the bat, knowing they needed some support. Our 8th grade counselor immediately began pushing in and doing SEL Tier 1 lessons beyond our pride time. So she was pushing into classes on almost a daily basis in a rotation of science, math, social studies, ELA, to work with the kids. Then we were targeting, so that was everybody in our 8th grade got this. Then our kids in our 8th grade that were really struggling, we targeted them and pulled them out for a boys emotional regulation group and a girls emotional regulation group. So then we could further narrow down some of those behaviors. We also noticed early on that the mean reviewed bullying presentation that you guys saw, we did early, because we noticed that they needed to hear some of that stuff and develop some of this empathy of understanding what they were doing to each other and themselves. So we did that early on in November. Coming back from Thanksgiving break, we really hit hard with a cell phone reset and a tardy reset, which we're still addressing on a daily basis. Tardies with Smart Pass, which Kelly talked about, have gotten much better. And cell phones are improving, but they're still an issue for a few, right? This isn't 80% of our kids have an issue with the cell phones. Most listen to the practices and things, but they go. The next bullet on that is communication to staff after referral is closed. So this is admin. We needed to take some self-reflection and take some accountability, which was happening. And we needed to work and look in the mirror and say, we need to do a more thorough job when we're closing out referrals to loop back and have a communication process with our teachers. So if we're saying, you have to stay after with Ms. Hamilton, and we're assigning and we're not looping back, but Ms. Hamilton can't stay after that day, then we're failing in this process. So how are we looping through and closing the gap, or closing the communication so that there isn't miscommunication, or it doesn't cause another referral? Because, okay, well, you told me this, and kid doesn't stay. Or I don't know what you really did there, so I'm putting in a second referral on kind of a follow-up situation where we had a plan. So we just needed to close that, so we did some of that. We had readjusted our hallway supervision in January after the break. Some of that was staffing issues, and we saw some peak times that we didn't have where we thought we had supervision, but we also got even more explicit with it with our staff, so they could be where they're at. We started holding in individual meetings for staff members for support. So if staff members that were writing some of the most referrals in the building, we were calling them in and having one-on-one meetings, and not to criticize them for writing the referrals, but to have a conversation of what do you need? What support can we give you, and what's really happening in there? Those discussions were fantastic, you know, and some of those led to, like, I really need the tier 1 coach to come in with this one class I have to observe it and give me some pointers so we can work through it. We already talked about SEL or Smart Pass, excuse me, and then we've moved in, that says SEL 7th and 8th, that should say 6th, I apologize. We pushed those lessons that started in 8th grade down to 7th and 6th grade, and those started after February break. So those are just recently getting off the ground to give another boost to the 7th and 6th graders. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, John. So at Kelly, you'll see the breakdown of our office support reports for the year. We tend to hover right around that 30 in a month range. This year, lower in September, lower in December. And that's fairly consistent. We're actually almost exactly where we were September through December of last year, so the 21-22 school year. Last year, there was a 60% reduction in our ODRs. Last year was just a bang-up year where we started to see lots of tiered systems and lots of practices at a tier 1 level coming to fruition. And for the most part this year, we've been relatively stable with that. We do always see an uptick historically, even when there were hundreds of officer reports in months in previous years. In the spring, what's interesting this year is that uptick came a little bit sooner. And I'll talk a little bit about that specifically around February in some advancing slides. Similar to what I think the middle school and the secondary was seeing, our number 1 offense is that insubordination. So I'm refusing to do my work. I'm not following an adult direction, for an example. And then we're also looking at altercations physical. And what we have found is, you know, at our level, what may begin as horseplay, sometimes one person doesn't appreciate it anymore. And then there's some emotions involved with that. And then I'm going to push you or hit them. And we tag those as 302B. We take the higher offense as opposed to lower offense. And one of the reasons why we did that is beginning last year, a group of staff members really identified some key things that we wanted to pay attention to, that we wanted to address. And when you walk into our building and you see our school-wide matrix posters posted around, one of the very first things under SAFE is that we are, you know, last year it said we are an altercation-free school, but this year it talks about we don't solve problems with our hands. We use our words, or we get an adult to help us. And so that is a particular area that we're focusing on. When we take a look at some noticings this year, 84% of our students have not received any office discipline referrals. And 93% of our students have either received 0 or 1. And so we look at those numbers particularly because are we saying, are our students responding to our tier 1 interventions, right? Are they buying into this pride ticket system that we have and the celebrations and the recognitions that we have with that? Are they, is there fidelity in our caring school community morning meetings, right? Some of those tier 1 practices that every student has access to. Just to shift numbers, I want to highlight that. I went from 84 to 93, and now I'm looking at a smaller percentage. 7% of our students received 2 or more referrals. So they might have received 2, they might have received 3, they might have received 7, right? 7% of our students, sort of thinking about that tier 2 range of students. In a perfect triangle, you want that to be about 15%. So we're a little bit under that, which is encouraging. And then some of our most needy students, right? 2.5% of our students have received more than 4 referrals, right? And so, again, you look at the triangle and you would expect about 3% of your student population is really high need. That 3%, by the way, we consider tier 3 students. They still need really good tier 2 support, and they still need access to those tier 1 supports, right? They still need that recognition through their PI ticket system. They still need to be participants in the caring schools community, but they also might need small group counseling in school. They also might need a check-in, check-out person at school, and they also might need some supports outside of school. These are some students who have high ACEs. I think the board has heard presentations before about ACEs, and think about trauma, right? Think about a parent who is incarcerated or has been incarcerated, right? Think about a student who has lost, I'll tell you, it's a little bit raw still. This morning, or this afternoon, we had a student, one of our 4th graders who was having a pretty significant difficult moment, had ripped up some papers, had thrown them on the floor, and was refusing to respond to our counselor, was refusing to respond to me at the time. Eventually just went into a corner and broke down crying, and finally said, I'm worried about grandma. Right? Grandma has been his primary caregiver. Grandma is battling an illness, a terminal illness, unfortunately. That's a pretty significant ACE, right? Like, that's a kid that has some pretty significant worries going on in his mind right now. And that happens in that 2.5%. And like the statistic John shared, that 3% from September through January, and I haven't run the data completely from February yet, 3% of our students were making up approximately 60% of our total ODRs, right? So it's a small population making up a lot of those ODRs. Specific to offense 302B, we compared last year, not the fighting, because if we were fighting, we'd be over. We just compared the pushing, the kicking, from the previous sort of coding that we used. This is heartbreaking as a principal. As of the end of February, we were exactly on pace where we were last year, with the number of office disciplinary reports connected with that. When you're putting all these practices in place, you sort of want to be ahead of the game. And we were actually, this year, 25% of those physical altercations occurred the week before February break. We had 10 ODRs out of our 38 total ODRs the week before break. So what does that tell us? Kids need to get away from each other. I'm not a strong proponent of February break, as some of my colleagues know. I think usually when we're getting back into the groove of things after the winter holiday break, we take this break off in February. This year, I'll say our kids need that. They were having a hard time managing some of their emotions. But that's encouraging, I think, coming off of that break and continuing to put things in place. And then the other thing that we're noticing is some pockets of referrals, and I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide as well. So what do we do, right? I'm very pleased to hear that so far, all 3 buildings have talked about this mean, rude, and bullying presentation, right? That was a tier 1 practice that we put in place across the board. We appreciate the folks from secondary who worked together to come up with that presentation, and quite frankly, we stole it and used it with our kids, and pretty much could use it as is. It was good for clarifying language, and it got to open up conversations about how do we address this, right, and how do we best respond. Our tier 1 team, I'm not talking this year. Earlier I alluded to a pretty significant reduction last year. The staff that's on that team does amazing work championing PBIS, and our students respond to it. They are constantly looking at data from Pride points earned, where are the hot spots, how are we going to address that hot spot, how do we recognize students who are doing well, how do we recognize students who are growing. They really do a great job digging into our school-wide data and coming up with some initiatives and some recognition for students. Can't be pleased enough with our PBIS team. We also taught at our staff meetings, look at our highest offenses, right? In fact, earlier this week, we looked at those 2 highest offenses from September to February, and we really drilled down to thinking about not only what we're seeing, but what is that about, right? So when a student is refusing to follow directions of adult, generally, not in all cases, but generally that's about avoidance, right? When a student is pushing or hitting someone, it's really about emotional regulation. How do I handle the emotions that are coming up, and how do I handle it better? So we really drilled down to what is sort of the root cause of that, of those 2 infractions, and then instead of addressing what do we do when a kid hits, what do we do when a student cannot emotionally regulate? Right? How do we support a student who cannot emotionally regulate? By the way, how do we also hold them accountable when they hit? Right? So you acknowledge the feeling, and you come up with replacement behaviors. One of the things that's important to us, especially when we have 93% of our students who have 0 or 1 office discipline report, there's a lot of positive behavior going on, and how do you recognize that, right? How do you honor those students who are showing up to school every day and doing a fantastic job and doing what adults are asking them to do? And so, again, the work of our PBIS team is just brilliant in this area, in coming up with class recognitions, coming up with dessert with the principal, which, as you can see, happens quite frequently, right? And we try to make it a little bit even more special. Like, it's pretty cool to be able to have an ice cream, but we also do it in the morning. Sorry, parents, right? But how often do you have to have ice cream at 9:30 in the morning? So some of those little things that happen. Those first 4 bullets are a lot around Tier 1, but we know that our students sometimes need more support. They need those Tier 1 things, and they also need Tier 2 things. And so bi-weekly, we review our ODRs with our Tier 2, 3 team to ensure that students are accessing supports and responding to those supports. So if you can think back to that 1-page flyer around our strategic plan, and you think about that big rock of climate and culture, right? It talks in that, specifically in that area of the big rock, around Tier 2, 3 supports, right? Are we using data to identify those students who might need support? And then, what is the fidelity of those supports, and how are students responding to that? That's really what this is about, right? Making sure that our students who are at that Tier 2, 3 level have supports in place. And we frequently will go through in our ODRs and say, these are the students that have multiple ODRs, and every time I'm just continuously impressed that our behavior health team and our classroom teachers can say, this student's getting check in, check out. This student's in an emotional regulation group. This student is, not responding to check in, check out, so now we're doing a modified version of check in, check out to see if they respond to that. So not only is there something in place, but we also know how that student is responding to that. And if they're not responding, you look at another layer of support, right? Ongoing behavior threat assessment team, we know that work is new to our district. Some really high need students there, right? That parentheses in 3 indicates that we currently have 3 students who have been through a full behavior threat assessment team protocol, and then continue to be monitored again on a bi-weekly basis by our behavior health team and our threat assessment team to see if they're making gains or to see if there's anything else that's concerning that's arising. Similar to that Tier 1 thing where we recognize positive behavior, when a student is making gains, it's great to recognize that growth, right? That doesn't mean we expect them to be perfect. It means that they're getting better. They're managing their emotions better, for example. On the previous slide, you saw pockets, similar to, I think what John explained. At the beginning of the year, we saw a lot of ODRs coming from our 3rd grade students, right? And so we pushed some supports towards that 3rd grade and specific students in that 3rd grade. Actually, a few specific students in that 3rd grade that were really raising our numbers early on. In the November, December range, we started to see a pocket within 2 classrooms at a 4th grade level. And that team now meets with members of our counseling staff who support many of those students on a regular basis to just align, again, additional supports for that classroom. So when we see those pockets arise, we're able to respond to that. And that comes from digging into the data that our PBIS team does at a tier 1 and digging into the data that our tier 2, 3 team does. And then the last thing I would say is, something that's relatively new, that's just beginning to form, but we're looking to roll it out next year, is a committee that's working on some baseline work around accountability, right? So, if you push a student out of anger and you intend to harm them, your first offense gets this. This is how we're going to hold you accountable. That's a baseline. Your second offense gets you this, and this is how you hold accountable. I want to be very clear when we say baseline, right? Because that's the minimum of the supports and the accountability that we have in place. There may be some things that are so egregious that the very first baseline might not suffice for holding a student accountable, and you might have to go to a higher level. So it really is looking at a baseline opportunity, and that committee has representation of sort of different roles in our building, and we'll also have family representation, eventually student voice as well. I think the board's aware of some like our town hall meetings that we have at Cali and other ways in which we get student voice. So that'll be a part of it. They sort of will get their feedback and try to implement it. It might look a little bit different than what the high school students are able to share when it comes to accountability. I think it's Pete's turn.
Thanks, John. All right, so we have Perkins here. Year definitely started off tough. We were really trying to find out what was going on, especially a lot of our younger kids. But as you can see, the trend is that things are going in the right direction and moving down. Like most groups, we had the December, I guess it would be the Santa Claus scare that we could hold over kids, because that's what kind of helps decrease things a little bit. And we really did a nice job going into December, knowing that January is a tough month, so we really spent a lot of time in December planning and prepping for January, so that we were reviewing those expectations and going through things. So even though it was a kick-up, December, when you're coming from about 2 weeks of a month, and then January, you had about 3 or 4. So like the other groups, 1.0 or 1.01 insubordination, failing to follow directions, refusing to do work, those types of things. 3.01A is interesting with the primary kids, especially the kids that are having these, because a lot of this is it's dangerous behavior towards themselves. They're jumping off stairs, they're climbing on furniture, they're doing things that they might do at their house and not realize that that's not appropriate at school. So it's not always looking to hurt others or that horseplay with individuals. It might be things that they're doing that aren't safe, that could cause them harm. So the teachers are really making sure that they're documenting those pieces as well. Some of the noticings, so we talked about that, we're averaging about 11% besides December. We're getting those decreases down in behaviors, and I think it's really just kind of getting those expectations under control. 80% of our students have not received a referral, and so 230 out of the 289 students, I think we're at like 294 right now. And then 89% of the students received 0 to 2 referrals. So that 9% increase, saying that, all right, 9 kids, or not 9 kids, what is that? 26 kids or 26 referrals they learned after the first time they got a referral. So that means the intervention that we gave was working, it was successful, they learned, we haven't seen a referral again. Things that we're noticing, kind of like we talked about some pocket groups, 14 students K through 2 make up 281 out of the 416 referrals. So it's 68% based on 14 students. So that's really, it might depend on how the teacher documents, but those are the behaviors that we're seeing. And then in kindergarten, that's our group that we're really targeting, giving a lot of supports to, because they're just really having a hard time understanding expectations and what school needs. So 600 or 69% of our referrals are coming from our kindergarten students. And then if you look even closer to that, 5 students make up 55% of those referrals. One of the things that we noticed too is 16 out of 25 of the students in K that have received referrals So 64 came from outside agencies. They didn't go through our UPK program. So we don't necessarily know when they're coming in what needs they're going to have. And then action steps. So action steps. So our behavioral health team is amazing. If you look at that, out of 59 students that received referrals, 51 students are in a tier 2 intervention. So like Jeff said, that could be check in, check out. That could be primary project. That could be, if it's an outside, it could be Catholic Charities. We just have a lot of great interventions in district and out of district that are housed in our building. So 51 out of the 59 students do have some type of intervention that we can have at tier 2. And like Jeff said, depending on what time of year, it might be, okay, they started with check in, check out, now they're doing small group counseling, or they're doing emotional ABCs. So depending on where their need is, it might shift the supports as the year goes on. If they are growing, or even if it's not showing growth, we want to make sure we're trying different things. We're doing a lot of restorative conversations, because obviously the student has a meltdown in class, and we're talking kindergarten, so we're seeing a lot of almost like a temper tantrum behavior with a class with 19 kids in it. So it impacts the instruction. So we're really making sure that we're taking that time, sitting down with the other students in class, sitting down with the students, talking about the impact it had on them, and then also doing the same thing with the student as well, so they know the impact on their peers. And we're doing those restoratives pretty much everywhere, so as well as like with the debriefs with staff. There's a trauma piece that if you're put in a difficult situation, something starts to look like it might be that situation that you dealt with before. If you don't have that debrief, you might automatically assume it's going to go that way. And our students can read our bodies, so if they know that you're getting in that tentative, back off state, they're going to read you pretty good. So we're giving the staff some time to debrief. We also, in our weekly sways, we do temperature checks with staff so that they're allowed to check in if they want us to stop in and check in. But then we're also, and this is more of a shift recently, anytime we have an escalated situation, we're making staff have a debrief either with an admin or a behavioral health individual. We've noticed, and this is taking off of some of Carrie's data, is really making sure that we're finding ways to get extra support first thing in the morning. We were seeing a lot of our ODRs were coming in the morning, so we wanted to start shifting some additional support in the kindergarten classrooms so that they just have some extra help, getting their coats off, putting their stuff away, getting their breakfast ready, getting their morning routine going, where not always a teacher by themselves can't do at that level if there's a kid that might escalate. We started our buddy classes, which is part of our SET plan. So second grade is with kindergarten, which second grade is doing an amazing job this year, so they're really great role models to go down to kindergarten. Same thing with our first graders, are doing a wonderful job, and they're helping out with our UPKers, just to build that community feeling. So you see someone in the hallway, hey, my buddy, and they write letters to each other and do activities on Fridays, which is a lot of fun to see. Tier 1 and Tier 2, Tier 3 coaches, they do a ton of work with the staff, like the other buildings have mentioned. If we start looking through the data and seeing that a teacher is struggling and they request some help, or they meet with me and they say, we try to help them, not an I got you moment, but hey, what can we do to make you or help you be more successful in the classroom? And then it also helps us target those behaviors. In our behavioral health team meetings, we constantly look at our data, seeing where those trends are with discipline. And then our monthly Tier 1 meetings, those are the behaviors that we're targeting. So for example, in October and September, our major write-up was due on fleeing in classrooms. Kids just thought, oh, it was okay just to leave the classroom and go out in the hall and run up and down the hallway. So Brian Melkoff, our Tier 2 or our Tier 1 coach, worked with some students. They created a video about a stop sign, so every classroom has a stop sign in it, so the students know, hey, if I get to the stop sign, that means stop. Drastically drop down or fleeing. And the kids had such a kick out of us watching it because Mr. Melkoff was there with Red and a bunch of other students, so it was really neat to see. But we've done similar things like that in the room where we've targeted certain behaviors. We implemented our pride ticket system. Sometimes we'll highlight certain pride behavior. For example, if we're in the cafeteria and we're having a hard time being at the right volume, we might put on the announcements, hey, our goal today for our pride is having level 1 volume in the cafeteria. And classes do that, they earn pride tickets. And then we actually we got to our 4,000 pride tickets, so students are having all students are having cookies tomorrow because they're earning their prize. So we're really trying to make sure that we're celebrating everyone. We also have our ice cream with the principal. I haven't been around long enough to have it impact me like Jeff.
It'll come.
But it'll come. But we're just making sure that we're celebrating all the good things that are going on, and the teachers are really just buying into it. One thing that we've seen is how we're doing referrals. There's some discrepancy on some teachers will count this as an office discipline referral, another teacher will count this as a classroom referral. So we sent a survey out to class, or out to the teachers in the beginning of February, just talking about how we're responding to behaviors, because what we want to see is that there's consistency there. If if a teacher has a student that flees the classroom and they go out and they talk and the student returns, and that teacher just thinks, okay, that's just teachable moment they came in, another teacher writes that kid up. So that it's discrepancies on how we're dealing with things, so we want to make sure that all the teachers are responding. So we've been working through that process with our leadership team on trying to level those expectations out, similar to what Jeff was saying. If this occurs, this is the consequence, or this is how we're going to respond. Again, we look weekly at our behavioral data. We also collect data, our secretaries collect data on how many support calls are called. So when a teacher calls and they can't handle something in the classroom, we collect that. One, to know what students are the most frequent that we're finding, that we're responding to make sure that's leveling out. So the student that we're responding to most should be the student that has the most office discipline referrals. If we start seeing we're responding to this student but we never see a referral, our tiers aren't going to hit that and catch that. So we're not getting that student the right support. So that's a kind of nice way to balance things out. And then with that, we've really tied in things with parents. We talked about, the number of students at kindergarten. So we have function-based thinking plans to support those students. 5 of those students at kindergarten have function-based thinking plans, which means that the teachers, the parent, and the student all meet on those plans monthly to kind of make sure that it's meeting what the student needs. But then it keeps the parent in the loop, as well as when we're going through our ISD process. Parents are invited to the ISD meetings. They have an idea of what the plans are, and we can track that progress. So, and the fun part is those fun phone calls that we have every night. We make sure that we want parents to know what's going on. Student did really good. They had a great day today. We want to make sure we call. But then if they're struggling, then we also feel comfortable calling through because we're hitting on the positives. Lastly, Mary Kate Wilbur, our AP, has been really working with Krista and our UPK teachers on communicating more with those, not just our UPKs and getting curriculum going for our UPKs, but also outside agencies, so that we make sure that the pride language is being used at those other agencies, but then that's consistent. And I think the nice thing about that is if we can get those communications going, it might not solve all of our problems, but we can support those students when they come starting in the fall. We know how to best support them. Gary.
Thanks, Steve. All right. So, our Lincoln School data is going to look kind of a similar trend that you're seeing. Big man up here. You're going to hear some repetition. September started out nice and small. We had some increases in October. And and some of that is also like our teachers are documenting things as classroom incidents as the year starts. And then as students are not responding, then it becomes that higher level office discipline referral. November, December, we continued on a decrease. January, we spiked back up. Some of that we can attribute to one, coming back from break. I think that was mentioned previously. We got struck with staff illness pretty heavy in January, so we did have more staff absences. And we also gave some longer assessments, right? So we went and did our ready diagnostics, which are longer, but we also gave our benchmark assessments, and we had some kids shutting down. And the conversation at grade level meetings and PLCs is not about letting up on that necessarily, right? Because we know we're preparing our kids, especially our second graders, moving to Kelly for those longer assessments, but teaching strategies. How do you cope? How do you get the grit? How do you get the stamina? And really using that as a teachable moment, not just like, it's a noticing, it's a, yeah, we have to do some things differently, but how do we do that to support our kids in those situations? Because ultimately we know that that is part of their education. And then February went down a bit again. So our top 2 offenses, similar of what you're seeing. Our number 1 was the 301A, and I know Pete mentioned with our younger kids, sometimes that's making unsafe choices for themselves or around others. It also is, I'll say, sometimes our kids are frustrated and they throw something, right? They're not targeting it at somebody, not specifically throwing it at them, but it goes in a direction that is endangering to others. And that's some of those behaviors that are in there. And then insubordination, which is that just failure to comply and follow directions. So our noticings. You're going to hear the triangle theme again. 86% of our students have not received any discipline referrals throughout the year. Right? That's aligned with that triangle where we want it to be. 94% of our students have 0 or 1 office discipline referral. And then looking at that tier 2, 6% of our students have received 2 or more referrals. All but 1 received tier 2 supports. Please do not worry, I did not forget about that one student. That one student had an interesting circumstance that both of those referrals happened early in the fall on the bus. Nothing in the classroom, nothing during the school day. We were able to work with the family and the student. Haven't had a referral since, a bus or anywhere else. Just didn't fit any of our tier 2 programs. We didn't have a tier 2 transportation program. 2.4% of our students received more than 4 office referrals. All of them are captured in our tier 2 and tier 3 support systems. So our action steps. I actually encourage more referrals. Alignment of our office discipline referrals and classroom incidents to our support logs. As I brought our support log, office referral classroom incident data to our tier 1 team, we saw a trend that some of our students that were getting frequent support calls were not capturing the discipline data. I think you've heard similar from Pete. So we actually encourage more. We want to make sure that that discipline history is telling the story for our kids, for supports, for families, for our students, and in honesty for the next year's teacher, right? Like, we know there are some kids that will respond differently to different personalities, and you might have a kid who says struggles one year and doesn't the next. But also as a teacher, if you're having struggles with a student and you look back or someone looks back and says, well, gee, last year looks great, but really it wasn't, we didn't do any justice for anyone there. So making sure that that story is really telling the story for our students, for our families, and for the supports. The use of the tier 2 and 3 supports, we've worked a lot on the system, and when I say we, I really mean like my tier 2, 3 coach has done a lot of work on systems, and I've supported that work, but she's the one who's done the work. Using our RFA system, there's a lot of seamless pieces here where I'm going to echo what you heard earlier. When you say a name of a student who's struggling, and you can say, oh, we had this support, and now we've added this support, or hey, they were successful from this support, and now they've moved into this, which is a lower level support. That's that like golden feeling that you know those systems are really taking hold and working. We also started lower level support plans for students before reaching tier 3. So there's those students that could feel creeping up. They weren't quite to a tier 3 level yet. And so this is actually going to go along with those identifying triggers and trends and meeting with some teachers. So we kind of said, okay, we're seeing, and sometimes it's easier from the outside to see the trend. I'm seeing that this student seems to flee the classroom every day during writing. Right? We were able to pinpoint some triggers, identify kind of a reward motivation system for that student, put it in place, and then that student didn't move to the tier 3 level. Right? So they were on the brink, we could put something in place before that was needed, and then we could bring back into it. Right? So this is kind of that high 2, get into the swell of the wave and come back down. We've been able to do that in a few situations, but it's been done collaboratively. So it's the social worker, myself, and the classroom teacher coming together and saying, hey, let's take a look at this kid, or seems like we're getting frustrated with this kid. Let's wrap around with each other and put some things in place. We also added a tier 2 support called Peaceful Alternatives to Tough Situations. We call it the PATS program. That's provided by Mike Crespo from the YAP program. And that's helping our students understand how to respond in difficult situations rather than resorting to physical aggression, but also rather than going to verbal aggression. So that's a program that he's finishing his first round with, and we have a second group ready to start with him for that. We also reviewed, we saw a trend of incidents of that endangering welfare of others coming from the playground. So we did some review of active supervision expectations. It is, teachers don't have enough time together. They're all in the playground together. There's a natural human instinct to connect. And we can connect, but we gotta find ways to make sure that we're spaced out and connecting and still providing the active supervision for our kids. And that's gonna be revisited as the weather warms up, heading into spring 2023, right? And then meetings involving families and student supports. We have been able to bring in, for our tier 2 and tier 3, if we have students who are receiving supports from multiple people within the school, or multiple people within the school and outside of the school, we've been setting up some of those parent meetings on a regular basis to bring in the Wayne ARC case manager for the family, to bring in the outside counselor via phone call. And that's just helped us make sure we're all on the same page, giving the same consistent messaging for students. Even at this age, some of our students are pretty good at pitting adults against one another, or hey, he said this, she said that. It just takes that off, saves us some time, makes sure we're giving consistent messaging, and has really helped to support our kids. That is the end of our presentation. What questions do you have?
For the high school, I know there was a slide that mentioned missed lunch detentions, and I guess I'm just curious how one can miss a lunch detention if that student is present in the building that day, and we know their location. How do they miss a lunch detention?
Yep, so that's a good question. So one of the things that sometimes happens is that we will meet with a student at the end of a school day and assign them a lunch detention the next day, and either they will forget or they might not forget. But we have tightened up that process a little bit better. I know the assistant principals have started to walk to the classrooms to escort students to lunch detention if they miss. We have a list of who belongs there, so if students are missing, we will put a note through SmartPass that they're missing, and then the security guards can go to the lunchroom to find them. Sometimes students miss because if we assign it on a Friday, then on a Monday, they forget that they had it. And depending on what's going on in the building, we might also not catch up with them. So we're tightening up that process a little bit through SmartPass and also with the assistant principals walking. But because we got rid of the paper passes, we do want to put maybe a paper reminder process into place for that too, so that we can ensure that they get there. And also let the teachers know before their lunch period to send them down. So those are some things that once we noticed that was happening, we wanted to find a way to tighten that up a little bit.
I have one more. Regarding the meetings with the parents and the signing of the behavioral contracts, do you have any data on the number of meetings that were set up, how well those were attended, and the success of those contracts that have been put in place with students?
I don't have exact numbers on that right now, no. But we do have a handful of students. I think it's less than 20. We had about 20 that were rising to a high number of incidents. And with that, if we did not have a parent at the school with those meetings, then we did call. So all parents were either present or on the phone for those meetings. So we did have, I think every single student had a parent either present or contacted. And I would say probably, and I'm guessing at this point, to be honest, I think probably about 60% of those students, their disciplinary referrals have gone down extremely significantly. There are some that are still rising to the top, and then they're experiencing some progressive discipline. So when they break their contract, the consequences are a little bit steeper than they would normally be. So, because they have gone through that contract process with us.
When did the Smart Pass get rolled out?
It was in February. It was the first full week of February is when we implemented. I don't have the exact date, but after. Yeah, it was right around the first full week of February. So after the winter recess, we put some training in place for teachers. We put some training in place for hall monitors and security, and then we put the students through a training process of how they can write passes, what the passes are for, the time limits on passes, and then the administrators all also went through training on how to limit passes. So for example, if there's a student conflict, those two students can't be written a pass at the same time. So we did all of that, and I think it was there was a trial week in February, and then full implementation the week right after that.
At the middle school, we did it the week coming out of February break. So leading into February break, we did the prep work with our students in Pride, did lessons planning, worked with our staff at the family meeting. Then coming back from February break, we went full implementation.
Thank you, guys. Okay, 5.3 budget presentation, Ed.
Mr. Gunn, how long do you think this will take, your presentation will take?
10 minutes.
Earlier, I clocked it at 8 minutes 45 seconds, and that was with about a minute and a half
Do you,
of.
Lena, or do the students want to come up now? It's already 7:40, almost 8.
Ah, come on.
If you like students, you can come get your papers in. Unless you want to see the budget. I gotta go to practice. That's what I know. That's why I'm saying that. You can come and you gotta have the paper though.
Right, thanks, Mr. Harris. See ya. You don't want to stay for riveting round 2?
I'll get it back.
Okay, all right. Nice job with your presentations. Okay. I didn't want to start till everybody's done signing. So tonight we're going to take a look at, and I didn't even change the title because it's the same one that I do for the Community Budget Forum. What I want to talk about is we've had some budget presentations. We had a little lag with like information coming in. I get the governor's proposal, we have that, and then we kind of dissipate, and then everything wraps up rather quickly at the end. So just trying to put back on people's minds what our revenue estimates are, governor's proposal review, expenses, closing the gap, and our current reserves so people are aware. If you remember a while ago, one of the second budget presentation I do is on the tax cap. So our tax cap is 3.28%, which is an increase of about $465,947. Included in there is a rollover amount of $160,132. So just some informational stuff for you. Tax levy information, historically we've gone out anywhere from 2 to 2.6, 2.7 range. So I just used 2% right now as a number. If we were to increase 2%, the tax levy would then be $14,481,030. Asterisk that, because that doesn't mean we're going out at 2%. I got to put the whole budget put together. Those of you who've been through this know that you get bits and pieces, and then it's trying to put the whole thing together to finish the puzzle. Our local revenue total would then be $16,284,480. So a little bit of the revenue side coming in. The local revenue, remember we have our pilots, we have all that other stuff, which is our local revenue that we do. This a little over 1.8 million. Our state and federal revenue, that's the biggest chunk of our budget. That's the $41,173,735. The bulk of that you'll see is incorporated with the state and federal for the governor's proposal. Gives us a total revenue of $57,529,200. Governor's proposal, try to do a side-by-side comparison. People ask sometimes, how can you do the governor's proposal, not actually, if you go online, the numbers are different, because I want to do a side-by-side comparison of what we're looking at. The state aid runs actually what we're getting versus the state aid next year. So that's where we'll see some differences, but I like consistency. I like to see what the governor proposed to what the governor proposed, because then we always kind of know what the state aid picture is going to be at the end. The governor's proposal is consistently lower. I know I'm going to get a little bit more at the end. So foundation aid, we have an increase to $29,191. If you remember, years ago, they decided that they were going to fully fund foundation aid, not give us any of the back stuff, okay, but just get us to the level we should have been at. So next year is the last year of that foundation aid increase. All right. And for those of you who have been watching budget presentations, and I know I've talked about it before, and I've talked about it last year even, they talk about that fiscal cliff. So after the 23-24, the 24-25 school year, there's that fiscal cliff people keep talking about. And that's because when you look at this, the requirements and the increases of foundation aid are coming from COVID money. So once the state stops receiving that from the federal government, we don't know how the state is going to maintain this funding. So just putting that out there. They could have a great source in the background that nobody knows about yet. Different things could be coming in financially for them. Those are those things that nobody knows about after next year, what's going to happen to foundation aid. BOCES and special ed services. If you take a look at that, it goes from 5 million to 2.7. Holy cow, what happened? Nothing. Okay, last year, they ran the numbers for the governor's proposal. The BOCES was incorporated in, also incorporated the full BOCES cost, plus your private access cost, plus your hardware and technology, plus your software library in there, and I believe even transportation last year. They grouped a whole bunch of stuff in there. But when you break it out, it's about the same. Okay, most of our BOCES costs are pretty close every year, so our BOCES revenues are going to be about the same. So we get about 2.7 million in BOCES cost. High cost, excess cost, just a slight increase in there. So you see variations on this. This is reimbursements for some of our high cost, excess cost students. So depends upon the students, what services they get, those type things. Private excess cost, again, very minimal change. Hardware technology, that's based upon the numbers per student. Same with our software library textbooks amounts and those sources there. So you can see most of the stuff stays pretty much the same. Transportation costs, looking at it be about 2.4, so a little increase on some transportation costs with some expenditures. Building costs, that's what we use to pay off our debt service. So really when that comes in, that goes right back out to pay off our loans. Medicaid reimbursement is a pretty consistent amount where we're at. In the universal pre-K, you'll see a huge increase here. This is what we can use only for UPK spending. So we have about, last year the proposal was $305,968. After everything got all said and done, they increased the UPK funding to $668,169. So, and Christy can correct me on this, I think last year we added another UPK teacher with that funding, about a whole bunch of supplies and those type things. So we're using that money for the right source. Gives me a grand total of $41,539,859. So those are the governor's proposal year to year. Expense summary, so right now, throwing everything in the kitchen sink. For those of you who've been on the board before, you know I throw everything in and then I try to fine tune and tweak everything. So right now, about $67,108,069. Some of the things that affect a lot of this is our TRS rate is 9.8%, our ERS rate is 13.1. Health insurance, we got some variable rates in there. Working with Smolin Blue, Excelis Blue Cross Blue Shield, different. Normally they do a general increase. This year they're doing specific plans with specific increases. So it's taking a little bit more time to get some of that tweaking in. But if you remember last year, we had a huge 21% across the board increase. Okay, that's what ate up most of our increase last year. So here, again, a good chunk of it is going to be for health insurance. So closing the gap, things we always take a look at. Everybody panics. I don't panic yet. I get nervous now. I never panic until we have all the finalized data. Finalized the New York State budget amount. So the two houses are still working on that. So some of the interesting things that they've both agreed upon, if you've been keeping up with those type things, is that one of the things we talked about, we had a $366,000 high impact tutoring. Both sides for the Senate and the Assembly agree that they shouldn't be directed specifically towards that. I don't have further to say that yes, they're going to totally remove that, so that's going to decrease our foundation aid, or if we can just use it in any other way. No more details available, but that would be nice if they allowed us to use it however we needed it. And then some of the reporting things. Most of you don't know all the reporting stuff that has to go into New York State. They're trying to stop the duplication. So we double transparency reportings and a lot of that stuff. And almost all the information we get, if we send it to the state, if they just had other programs, they could just pull it from there and get the exact same stuff, but instead they make us report it multiple times using different tweaks to it. Those type things. The nice thing that they want to do for our BOCES services, both houses want to increase that cap, which is good. So there's a 30,000 cap on salary, so that would be beneficial for us. And also, and I know Julie mentioned it earlier, we went to a thing and presentation on funding school lunches. So both houses are part of that also. So those are some things. I don't know how that's going to affect stuff. If they're going to provide funding for lunches, does that decrease our foundation aid? Does it take that and say you have to use it for this? Those are all those things we don't know until they happen. So that's why I always take a look at this, try to do the best I can to be prepared. Budget reductions, again, once I throw the kitchen sink in, I spend a lot of time trying to go through line by line. If you're ever bored and want to look at a 774-page budget spreadsheet with me, come on over. I'll be happy to have a second pair of eyes on it. And just making sure that I have everything in there. Did I miss something? So I know we met today, we talked about some staffing stuff. Dan's all set to meet with me again. I'm like, I need like Thursday, Friday, and Sunday to have hours to go through everything again. And then I'll be looking to meet with him and getting some of that stuff from him. So just trying to make sure everything that we're looking for is in there, that I didn't duplicate something and those type things. Tax levy increase, what's our tax levy going to be? We don't know yet because I don't know all the pieces of the puzzle yet. Is it going to be, 3% this year instead of 2.6? Can we go 2%? Those type things. Retirement breakage, right now we haven't heard of any retirees going out or anything like that, so I don't have that yet. And then taking a look at our use of reserves and our fund balance. Current reserves that we have. I'd like to stress this and share this with the board. So these are the 5 reserves that we can use to help balance our budget. So they can only be applied for what they're denoted for: workers' comp, unemployment, liability, ERS, and TRS. So this is what we have in our workers' comp, about 1.3 million there. Unemployment is about 1.5. Liability is about 1.3. ERS is 4.1. And TRS is 949,000. Gives me about 9.4 million in those reserves right there. Okay, so I can use some of that to budget for workers' comp expenses, unemployment expenses, liability expenses, ERS expenditures, and TRS expenditures for us. So that's also something that we can use. And if you have any other questions, this will be on the website. They can contact me, or if you have any questions, I can answer them now. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, public comment. At this time, public comments are invited from those individuals who have signed in at least 5 minutes prior to the start of the board meeting, and we have nobody signed up this evening. Public comment can also be submitted via email to susan.heisenhour@newarkcsd.org or brad.steve@newarkcsd.org. When emailing in public comment, please use the subject line, public comment. Number 7, old business, new business, issues of public interest. 7.1, Susan's gonna respond to our public comments.
In response to Dave Collette and his public comment and his email around DEI, it is something that I've already addressed with him, and I will just reiterate that our instructional practices are aligned to the New York State standards, that our goal is and always will be to engage students with diverse opportunities and experiences, both for social and emotional as well as academic growth, so that they can reach their full potential.
Thank you, Susan. Now 7.2, linkage update. We need to decide a date and time that we're gonna have our safety and security linkage meeting. Anybody have a date in mind? For Brad, we can't do Tuesdays or Thursdays because those are lacrosse games. Do we want to do it on a Wednesday, just to keep it in alignment of our board meetings, and where do we want this location of this meeting to take place? So, anybody have any suggestions?
Any of the off Wednesdays, after 5:30, I guess is the best time for everybody. It's good with me.
Matt, didn't you say 6 o'clock is better for you? Matt?
I'm shaking my head, yes.
How long will it be?
I want to keep it to an hour. I want to keep it to an hour. I don't want to go over that.
I mean, I think, I don't know that I don't know what the usual attendance is for our linkage meetings, but, I mean, that would maybe influence the amount of time or questions that people had or discussion, but, maybe could we do it before a board meeting on one of the Wednesdays that we're already going to be here? And then, maybe, I know 6 is good for you, but I don't know if 6 to 6:30 is enough, if you want to do it.
I believe that would be enough. You guys? I think because it's a very brief discussion, and I was going to have Mike Newman come and present what AI does, what our technology infrastructures help with our security of our buildings, and talk about the implementation of the halos and the cameras talking and everything. So I don't want that presentation to be more than 15 minutes, and then, just a brief overview of our diagram.
If we're gonna get a presentation from Mike Newman, could we just start the board meeting, start it as a linkage meeting, run it into the board meeting, put the presentation in the board meeting, so that we get more time on the subject and we get more people that can actually maybe come to the board meeting. But just sort of integrate it, start it out as a linkage, and where we can have an interaction between the people who show up, and then start the board meeting and give the presentation.
I like that idea. Okay, so that's where we'll put it. We got to look at our future. April 5th.
That's spring break.
That's spring break.
It is the 12th, it must be the next meeting.
Yeah. Yep, it is the 12th, and then we have
I always see 4 to 5.
4 to 5.
We could switch that, okay.
Yep. We do have the Curie update and the extended aid
How about
program.
the April 26th, because I would like to be present for that meeting, and I will not be here on the 12th.
So my only concern is there's some decisions that
My only concern is that there's some decisions that will need to come out of that linkage meeting, more than likely, that if you guys are fine pushing it that late, that's fine, but I just wanted to make that.
we have a board meeting on the 19th. We might have them back. Yeah. Or will you be here on the 19th? Yeah. So I have a week.
And we need to know that, what is that, like, we have to make decisions to affect
The budget.
the budget. That's what I want to know. Okay.
And some hiring.
Okay.
So what are you saying?
April 19th. We'll have the linkage meeting and then have Mike Newman's presentation be in the, yes, but that's, the PTAC presentation will end at 2:30, so we'll be able to be over here. It's the whole day. Get to be with each other the whole day. Yeah. Okay. So April 19th will be our linkage meeting on safety and security with a presentation in the board meeting from Mike Newman.
And you're looking at him to present what specifically, the infrastructure, the technology?
Yes. Yep.
Ed, are we gonna be able to get the Zoom meeting hopefully worked out for my, for the 12th?
First initial one. We can try it again, I'll see if Kyle can do it, because if we do it, it has to be broadcast. So if I just set up the Zoom, I can't do that, so I'll reach out to Kyle just to see what he can figure out what's going on. Maybe we'll have to set up a test one with you at one point, just to see what it is. And
Julie, Josh,
quick question on a couple of things. Location, we're gonna do it where the board meeting is gonna meet, so it'll be, I believe here, that I can't remember, I looked at the calendar. I know at the last meeting they're also talking about a possible survey. Do you want that to go out, and who's working on that, and Stacy?
That is also another discussion item that we needed to discuss here of when do we want to have the survey go out to have the discussion points of what we're discussing at that linkage meeting? Do we want it to go out? So what were we thinking? We were thinking that same week?
Yeah, you should probably do it in tandem.
In tandem, yes.
That you're announcing, you're gonna announce the linkage.
My thought would be when you communicate the linkage meeting and the topic and what it's going to entail, then you would include that survey as well. But that's, again, something that all of you have to work through to make sure that that's the position that you want to do.
I would say coming back from break. Start.
I would say that coming back from break, we would start to put out, letting everybody know that there's gonna be a linkage meeting and the survey and all of that, so that there's a week in advance going into it that there's knowledge of this linkage meeting.
Why can't we just broadcast it every Monday for the next 4 weeks?
We can do that.
I think the more we shove it down people's throats, maybe they'll actually attend. And
We can ask Kyle to put it on the website for one. And then we can also have it on Facebook every Monday. And then we can do, I don't want to overload, so we can do
How
two
about
parent square messages,
Say two,
two.
maybe one the Monday before and one 2 weeks prior to that.
That would be the 17th. Some parent square coming out.
And then the next one would be during spring break, which
No,
I wouldn't do it. I would do it
27th.
27th.
And
Yep. And then April
the
17th.
17th.
Okay. And then with the one on the 17th, we can have the link for the survey. Tell everybody that there's going to be a survey, and then the survey is going to be given April 17th.
Enough time to analyze the survey.
Yeah,
That's a survey.
yeah.
True, true. Survey link March 27th. So, and then we'll look at the data. We'll see how it's progressing at our meeting. And then, oops, by our meeting, yeah. So by April 12th, we'll have the closed out the survey and collect that data. And then we can look at it at that meeting. Okay. Anything else? I was thinking in that survey, I would like to have a narration part where that people can just ad lib of what their concern may be. So it'll be a yes or no, and then a narration. Okay?
Is somebody working on that survey or somebody's working on it?
God, you are. You didn't know that?
No, I didn't.
I'll work on it with Brad, and then we'll correlate with Stacy. Okay. Verbal reports, instructional, Krista.
Sorry about that. Just a couple of quick items. One, I'll pass around if you didn't catch it on Parent Square. The parent PD sessions for March and April, one of which already occurred with the college night, but there's one coming up later in March where it's the transition for our preschool to school age students who are special education programming, talking about the differences from preschool to school age. That'll be a great one for parents who are currently have students in pre-K and are looking to come to kindergarten next year. And then in April, just to highlight some sessions there, Wayne Technical and Career Center opportunities. Danielle McGavis will be presenting on that. And changing the conversation on substance abuse will be a much larger public messages going out around that with Chris Heron, who will be here. So just wanted to share that. And again, a big thanks to Mikey DeVanzo, who's my administrative intern this year, split between middle school and spending a couple days with me, who's really been coordinating and doing a lot of the legwork on some of these family PD events. So thank you to Mikey. And just to remind you, we do have a superintendent's conference day coming up this Friday. It'll be a full day, so there'll be no students. Our staff will be engaging in a variety of collaborative work and learning throughout the day. Our teachers will largely be organized by department and grade level. Our paraprofessionals will be engaging in some professional learning, some choices that they had where they developed their schedule, and we're looking forward to really digging in on that day. It'll be a different kind of a day, but I think one that looks to be quite productive. Additionally, we do have some presenters coming in to work with our certain groups. So our UPK teachers will be working with the Midwest Partnership. consultants from the Warner School of Education will be working with our 6-12 math teachers. Just a lot of different options on that day.
Krista, I just have a question. Do you know how many people attended that college information night? Or can we find out? Oops, sorry.
I don't know why, I have to turn it off.
Okay. I don't have it in my head, Mary, but I can find that out for you. Yep.
Okay, finance, Ed, 8.2.
There we go. Getting a little button bushy here. Okay, so we've been doing a lot of budget work, which is the kind of expectation around this time of the year for my office. And I know Susan, Dan, Christian, they'll be wrapping up some more budget work, even though we worked on some stuff today. So that's still ongoing. And just so the audit committee is aware, the risk assessment part has been completed. The internal audit work is still going down, so I'm going to wrap everything into one here a little bit. And when I get both of those, I'll reach out to, if I got one already, I'll reach out to Catherine and Barrett, see if she wants to meet individually just go over that one, or wait till the other one is done too. Sometimes depends upon how busy their schedules are. So if you hear email on that, that'll be going on there. Been working with Dan on interviews for our transportation supervisor and our head bus driver. And just a reminder that we have the vote coming up on March 21st from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the high school foyer regarding that capital project increase there. If it's not needed, it won't be borrowed. We have our bid opening for the capital project on March 23rd. And for Board of Ed pieces, if there are any community members who are interested in Board of Ed candidate applications, they're available online or at the district office.
8.3, human resources, Dan.
Thank you. As I was saying, we are working through some interviews with senior bus driver and director of transportation. So that's going well. Also reporting back on a recruitment trip that I had to, in Pennsylvania this past week, which went pretty well. It was interesting. There was more tech teachers than I was expecting there, so got a number of resumes from people. Each one of them would require some relocation, so it's a bit trickier than, and you know, if it was a more local event, but you know, it's one of those things where you wouldn't know unless you were there. So it was a good experience, and got some nice leads at least from it. Also coming up for the next 2 weeks, we had recruitment events at Roberts, Wesleyan College, Brockport College, Nazareth, Huka. Those are these kind of table events that we scheduled on our own. We reached out to the local colleges so we can set up tables in each one of these buildings, or in each one of their, most of them are like in the high traffic areas, so dining halls, residence halls, things like that, and have an opportunity to advertise those events and also meet face to face with potential candidates. In addition to that, we're attending Syracuse and Rochester regional teacher recruitment day events. So those are a little bit less personal than these kind of table events that we set up too. So we're attacking it from a number of different angles. Later on, we're going to be doing similar table events at Geneseo, St. John Fisher, and then there is another teacher recruitment event at Harris Beach. So that's pretty much the next month or so for me. So thank you.
Well, Dan, if you get to NAS, the dining hall is amazing. Sue, get some Pittsburgh Dairy ice cream. Sue, superintendent report.
Okay.
I just want to echo what you said when you opened, Julie. I had it on my list too, and I'm hoping not to leave anyone out, so if I do, it's not intentional. I just want to say the musical was awesome. I came with my daughter, and I think we laughed so hard, and on our hour and 40-minute drive home because of the weather that evening, we talked about it the whole way. So it was just a great job done by all the students. Also in the same lines, music, the cavalcade of bands, all students were amazing, and it really showcased what our music department can do with students of all ages. Now, leaving out our art department, I just want to highlight that this Sunday is the opening of the 41st annual Wayne County High School Art Show at the Art Gallery on Miller Street. And then just a congratulations to the girls bowling team for bringing home the state championship one more time, and just wishing the boys basketball the best of luck this weekend in Glen Falls. If you were at the game, you would see quite a shot by Braden Steve. If not, go online and Google that, because right down to the buzzer with just about 0 seconds left, it was an unbelievable move. So congratulations to him and the entire team. Outside of that, I do want to thank Krista for leading Superintendent's Conference Day, with all the work that the instructional coaches are doing, the department leaders, and everyone else to make this day happen, so that we can focus on our academics and where we are moving in a really nice direction for our district. I'm caught up completely. Oh, there I am. Okay. Oh. Somebody hit it. Okay, and then lastly, I talked about this the last time, which is the community collaboration that's happening between the mayor, myself, the police chief, and now Newark Hospital has joined us. And we're very excited about this because we made some grounds today. And I just want to say thank you to Newark Hospital. They will be kicking in $5,000 for this event for our Student Leadership Conference, which we renamed today. It is going to be the first annual Newark Student Community Collaboration Conference. We have picked a tentative date. We just want to check with athletics as well as music to ensure that there's nothing, but we're looking at potentially November 4th. And we've also decided on a keynote speaker, which is Chris Koch. And his theme is, if I can. And he talks about if he can do it, basically you can too. He's a man who was born with no arms and no legs and travels the world. And so our theme will be, if I can, then we can too, meaning the Newark community, building community together. And so we're really excited about the potential of this to happen. And again, all of this is tentative, but it's very exciting for the school and the community as a whole.
Now, Sue, can we attend that event as well? Yes. Looking forward to hearing the date. Next, we need to I need approval of the amended consent agenda. First Miranda, second Mary. And next, board committee meetings and related updates, 10.1. Legislative committee, Ed, you stole my thunder. I was like, I got Danielle Grusso's message. The only thing that I will add to the fabulous news of what both houses are doing is they are asking for state education department to conduct a study on foundation aid formula. So that's good news that they're pushing for that. For Ford County, we have the March 24th conference. And also for legislative committee, we're creating follow-up letters to our legislators. Russ, do you have anything more for Ford County? No? Nothing to report for Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES for their meeting, but I do want to get a number of who's going to be attending the April 19th. Brenda, Mary, are you going? Okay. Matt, you gotta work. Scott, you gotta work.
I'm gonna try.
You're gonna try?
April 19th, you mean the PTAC?
The PTAC
Yes,
and
I am.
Wayne. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I will send an email to Erin to let her know that we are attending, so we can get some lunch and see our fabulous students at Wayne Technical Career Center and PTAC. Any committee reports? 10.2 audit and budget. we pretty much heard. Policy committee, you had a meeting on March 8th.
We had a meeting, we met on March 8th, we went through policies that we're going to see here that are basically all because of law changes, terminology changes, et cetera. The computer 6410 is to change some of the language on social media use and stuff like that. Yes. So that's that.
For facilities and safety committee, I had the pleasure of meeting some nice people of our police departments and do lockdown drills of Perkins, Kelly, and Lincoln. It was very insightful to see how these lockdowns take place, because I've never seen one. I've never been a teacher. I've never volunteered when one happens. So it was great to see the collaboration that happens after a lockdown drill, what went wrong, what went great. I do want to congratulate all the students and staff. They did an amazing job during this lockdown drill today. And then instructional committee. Do you guys have?
We have another meeting coming up April 13th, 9 o'clock at the high school.
Co-curricular committee.
March 28th.
Do you guys need? No.
Our next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You good? Good. Okay, I need a motion to accept the first reading of the following policies: 6410, 6550, 7512, 7670. Motion by Russ, second by Matt. Okay, our next future agendas are March 29th. We have a special board meeting at 4 p.m. at the district office. Our extended day and Curie update will happen on April 12th. And then April 19th, we have the linkage meeting and about safety and security with Mike Newman's presentation. Any other ideas? Matt?
Would it be possible for us to receive updated ODRs from each of the buildings on the first meeting of the month for the previous month, moving forward to the end of the school year?
So for April, have March.
June. We can see.
Yep.
I'd like to see what that data is trending.
I'm also trying to think of, this has been an idea of mine to have a year look of our calendar and plug in where we want iReady data, behavioral data, and then our DSAP and strategic plan updates. So this is a good opportunity that we can plug those in so that our meetings aren't very lengthy. And so also we can see those trends as they occur and have action steps of what those action steps are. So yeah.
I guess the only other question I'd have is, just for transparency's sake, would we be able to get the ODRs from last year? So for comparison, no?
You can't.
Yeah, you can't, because the disciplinary codes were different. That's,
Everything's different, and it was hard to match that up. So they had to go back and do what you saw, some of the pieces manually, some of the pieces manually. They're now aligned. It's coming from this year on. All right.
so when we have our agenda planning with Sue, we'll plug those in and I'll share when we can do those, so that,
It doesn't need to be a big old thing, but just
yeah.
the data.
Well, you brought up a good point that sparked my idea, so thank you, Matt. Yeah.
I think Matt brought up last time, it was Matt, we asked about, there was a culture and climate survey, I think, given to the staff members, and he mentioned if we could have access to that at some point.
I forgot all about that.
I forgot that too. I apologize. All right, it is 8:30. I need a motion to adjourn this meeting. Miranda, second by Russ. Have a good night, everybody.